Welcome to episode 366 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, today is a mailbag episode, but before we get into all your listener questions, the Bruins eked out a 4-3 overtime win over the Flames last night at TD Garden. They're now 7-1 on the season, and even 500 pretty much. So Bridget and Scott, let's jump right into some opening shifts on the game, and then we'll get to the mailbag.
Sure, I'll go first. Obviously, not a perfect game by any means. They blew a 3-1 third period lead. Still a couple bad penalties, but one important thing did happen, and that was that a lot of forwards who needed to get going and have something to feel good about got going. Pavel Zacha had a goal and an assist. His first points in 6 games. His first goal since opening night. He had been kind of combination of like he had a lot of quiet games in there, also a bit snake bitten at times when he did have chances. Seems like he had been pressing, like missed some nets on good chances. Pastrnak sets up each of the first 2 goals, primary assists, especially great pass on Hampus Lindholm's goal. I think a game that he needed, like after a pretty tough week that included the third period benching on Sunday against Seattle, and then a quiet game in Toronto. Brad Marchand gets the overtime winner. He's been playing better recently, so maybe didn't need that quite as much, but you just need it from everyone on the top 6. Elias Lindholm, I thought, had a really good game. Makes the steal behind the net to set up Marchand in overtime. Elias Lindholm was the best player in overtime. Charlie Coyle gets his first assist of the season, which is like just sounds crazy that it's taken this long for him to get an assist. But that was the nice setup to Cole Koepke. So I thought the top 2 lines both looked good. We can get into that a little more what the combinations were. But still a lot to clean up team wide. But good to see those guys get going, at least for one game.
Yeah, and I have a similar opening shift that's related, at least, because after the game, Jim Montgomery mentioned that he wants to keep the lines together for next game, which some people, including Brad Marchand, were a bit skeptical about. But the comment came from saying that he really liked what that Marchand, Elias Lindholm, and Brazeau line did and how they looked in the game last night. And then I also thought Johnson, Zacha, Pasta worked out. So, I mean, at least the top 6, it seems like there's not really a huge reason to change for next game. And that's what Montgomery said after the game. But then we got into the locker room and Marchand said, that's just how Monty coaches. He changes the lines all the time. And Scott pointed this out to me right before we started recording that Sunday. Montgomery said he wasn't going to change the lines, and they were all completely changed for this week. So, yeah, I'm hoping that he keeps the lines together for another game, because at some point in time, chemistry has to build. You have to find something that works better for your offense, because you can't just have guys looking good against not good teams, right? Because at some point that chemistry has to be there when you play better teams. And to me, keeping at least the top 6 the way that it was makes sense for now. There's another game against Ottawa on Saturday. Also a team that theoretically you should be able to get a win from. And I think that if you keep those lines together and they do what they did against Calgary, that it should be a recipe for success again against Ottawa. But will he actually keep them together is the question.
Yeah, and as far as just quickly, Tyler Johnson, I think it's pretty evident just the pace that he can play with. I thought that the Pastrnak line looked pretty quick. I know Zacha being put back at center ice, which is something that we haven't really talked too much about. It's always been a foregone conclusion with the addition of Elias Lindholm that Zacha was going to play the wing. We have Coyle as a 2C. And it's easy to say that because Zacha hasn't been great in the draws historically, but if he can fix his draw percentage, it's like Zacha is a good center ice option. We saw it last year. Sometimes when players are given a bigger role, they rise to the occasion. And then, Tyler Johnson was the other addition to that line. And you see the speed that he forces his linemates to play with.
By the way, on the draws, Zacha was 8 for 8 last night.
There you go. Like, I mean, that really was the biggest detriment, I would say, for people, not really wanting him as a center or being so okay with him just going to the wing. It's because he's not great in the draws. But
even that, like that, well,
still,
at least last season, it was like that really only came in the playoffs. He started struggling. Like regular season, he was over 50%. It's not like he was dominant, but he wasn't like 40% either.
I've always felt that the reason that everyone's so cool with him being on the wing and doesn't really mention sliding him back to center a whole lot is just because he's a better option to slide out there than some other guys. Like, we know that the Bruins have a few centers that are playing wing right now, but in terms of people that can play with Pastrnak, if you kind of want to keep them together in any way that you can a lot of the times, because the chemistry is at least there with those two. So sliding them to wing.
Chemistry.
Especially when we're talking about pasta.
But and to be fair too, like Zacha played wing with Pastrnak when Krejci was centering them a couple of years ago. So there was that too. And yeah, Scott, that's a good distinction, because in the postseason he was so poor in the draws. I mean, that's why Morgan Geekie had to slide into that center role. So yeah, a lot to talk about there. But my opening shift is something that Jim Montgomery said after morning skate on Thursday, which was, he was asked about Nikita Zadorov and if he is, pressing early in the season to be an impact player. And Monty said, I don't think he's pressing at all. And he went on to elaborate and just talk about how, essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but he has inconsistencies grasping what the team is trying to do in their system play. And there's times where he shows through his play, he knows exactly what the Bruins are trying to do. And then there's other times where he plays like he doesn't. And that was a pretty candid response for a question that I didn't really think Monty had to go there to even put this story out there, but he did. And I mean, it's not something that like is untrue. It's just sometimes you don't need to put something into the media, but he did. And it made me start turning my wheels to when we had Pierre Maguire on over the summer, right before training camp. I think it was like late August, early September. And we talked about Zadorov, and Pierre said, he's a great guy in the room. He's vicious. He's nasty. He can move for his size, has good hands for his size. But the biggest thing with him is, his response to coaching. And not in like a rebellious type of way, like legitimately, like is he coachable? Can he grasp what coaches are saying and implement it? And so Montgomery's comments just brought me back to what Pierre said. And so I think, and we put that on Twitter, and people are talking about it, and they're concerned, they're worried. Should they be? Is it early? I don't know, but it's something worth discussing. When the head coach is talking about something that one of our guests mentioned, it's worth going over.
Yeah, if you go back to that, obviously people can go back and listen to that interview that we did with him, and he talked about each of the new additions that the Bruins added, and he also said some things that were pretty accurate about Korpisalo. So yeah, obviously he comes from a background where he talks to a lot of the guys that are coaching people, not just like regular, NHL coaches, but guys that are training guys in the off season. And yeah, it was interesting. I've been thinking of it too, because it does seem like kind of a slow transition for Nikita Zadorov into the Bruins system. And Montgomery also said that it'd probably be a lot easier for Zadorov if the rest of the guys were also playing the way that they should in the system. Then it would be an easier fix for Montgomery to coach him, and it'd be more obvious.
Yeah, because that's a good point, because if Zadorov was the only one of the five on the ice, like not playing to the system, then it's very easy to highlight on video, like not rip him, but like show him in a productive way. Like, hey, like here's where your teammates are going. This is what you should be looking for. But when the whole team is like not playing the way the team wants to play, or the way the coaches want them to play, it's like, what are you going to show him on video? Like, hey, here's where your team. I know in this video he's actually 15 feet away, but here's where he's supposed to be. So like, look for that.
Also, you have to correct, like, you don't have a lot of time to correct one guy when you have to correct every single person.
So yeah, I think like, going back to that Pierre comment, I think like something like that, like if that's true, and it seems based on Montgomery's comments that maybe it has been so far, that it's probably going to take a little while for him to really get comfortable in this system. So like I don't think that should be a surprise, and it doesn't mean he's not going to get it either. Like we're 15 games in here, and while that's not the smallest sample, like we're into the season now, like it is still relatively early. So you're gonna have to give it a little bit of time. But um, you know, I don't think Montgomery would elaborate anymore, but like I would also be interested in like exactly what areas that's kind of showing itself, because there's a few that I think of, and one is, one of the things that's kind of dogged him his whole career is like he chases hits, and that results in him getting caught out of position. So like that could be one simple one where it's like he's just the system requires him to cover this area of the ice, this zone, because they play zone defense, and he's pulling himself out of the zone to try to hit someone. Like that could be one. Another, I feel like he's missed a lot of breakout passes or not made the right choice on the breakout. And again, maybe that's his teammates aren't in the right place, or maybe it's he's not reading it right and he doesn't, like, he has to think about where he's supposed to be going. And as we know, like if you think, then you play slow and you're probably going to make a mistake.
Yeah. I think, as an important distinction too is that Nikita Zadorov, I believe he went on the What Chaos podcast not too long ago, and he talked about just maturing more as a player on and off the ice throughout his career, and he mentioned that his time in Calgary with Daryl Sutter was instrumental in his coachability, and so that's worth noting too. Like I think the player is self-aware, but I think I think he's coming from a pretty good system, and a defensive-minded head coach where maybe he's not really the same player he was a long time ago. So there's that, and also a lot of individuals mention the the bouncing around X amount of teams and X amount of years. We've talked about it here. Scott's mentioned it before. He's pointed it out. Like on the surface, you can play that game and no one's going to say you're lying because what you're saying is true. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you realize there's a lot of gray area as to why he's bounced around so much. And some of it's the player's own doing with free agency, choosing to leave places. And then he was also involved in some pretty big hockey trades. So it's not that what people are saying isn't true. It's not that he hasn't had coachability issues in the past. But there's always more than meets the eye. I guess, so should Bruins fans be worried? I just think it's too soon. I think it's too soon. And
he's here for 6 years. So
and that's a different conversation. And I know we're not in the mailbag section yet, but this kind of relates quickly. Because Scott, I believe, tweeted out that there was a reminder for the mailbag, and the Tape to Tape podcast, which is hosted by Maria in Watertown and her co-host Carolyn. One of them asked us, basically, is it too early to judge the free agent acquisitions of Lindholm and Zadorov based on what we've seen so far? So obviously Lindholm had a really good game last night, instrumental in the game-winning goal. So it's kind of not the greatest time to ask that question simply optically because he's coming off a great play. But before that, I think that question, which probably was asked before that play, there's merit to it. So I just think it's, Bruins fans are looking at the Zadorov Lindholm acquisitions, the term that they signed for, the AEV that they signed for, and the early slow starts, and they're a little bit worried. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I just think that we all need to watch things play out a little bit here.
I personally don't think I'll be able to answer that question until when and if they make the playoffs and see what the playoff product looks like on the ice. Like if they can be effective in the playoffs, then that just means it worked out. Like if they're good enough for the Bruins to get into a position, obviously if they miss the playoffs, that probably says something bad about the acquisitions. But how do they perform in the playoffs is really going to determine how I feel about that. And obviously that's a long time away from now. So I don't know if we really have that answer until the postseason, necessarily, at least in my mind. But first, Scott, before you reply, can I just say, because you brought up Pierre, I wanted to plug this. Me and Pierre are broadcasting a UMass hockey game in 2 weeks. He's going to be my color commentator on November 24th. We have a game on Nesson, UMass Vermont. So tune into that. I was joking when we had him on, like, oh, you can be my color commentator this year. And then we got him in with Hockey East. So now he's going to be my color commentator in 2 weeks. I'll have to ask him a few more things about Zadorov.
Yeah, that's exciting. And I believe that's also your UMass homecoming, Bridget.
Yeah, I haven't broadcast a game at UMass since I was a student, which I graduated, not to make myself sound old, but I graduated in 2016. So I haven't even been to the Mullen Center since then. And it looks completely different now. So I'm excited for that. Weird full circle moment for me, just going to be going back to school and where I started broadcasting, and my color commentator is going to be Pierre McGuire. So it's just going to be, it'll be a fun night.
I don't think I've been to the Mullins Center since I was in college. So that would have been like the 2010-11 season.
Yeah, it's because Scott's older, just to put that out there. He's an old man.
Well, I'm just making sure you don't feel too old. I'm just being really nice.
Thank you. It did make me feel better.
That's really cool, Bridget. That's Bridget and Pierre inside the glass. That's pretty cool.
Well, I think we'll both be
I know.
First level, but yeah, actually no. So my friend Laura got hit in the face. She got elbowed in the face by a player when she was inside the glass at Providence last week, and she got a big cut on her nose, and I felt so bad. So yeah, it's a dangerous job.
Pierre almost
contact sport.
Pierre famously almost got like hit in the head in between the glass. I think like Ovechkin caught it, or somebody like caught a puck or something like that. Or I don't know. It's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Well, I think when he was on, he told us a story of one time that he got cut and had to go back and get treated by team doctors. But anyway, it's very quickly, like my thoughts on like if it's too early. Yes, it is too early right now. Like I might be able to start drawing conclusions before the playoffs. Like if we're halfway through the season and they're both struggling, I'm going to be concerned. But Brian, I think what you said about how Elias Lindholm has a good game last night, so now it already feels like can you, not really the best day to ask that. It's like that's kind of the point. It's like if now it's going to have to be more than one good game, but like if either one of them or both of them start to string together 3, 4, 5 good games, like you're going to feel a lot better. And that's probably going to come with the team strength. The whole team has not strung together more than 2 good games in a row. And the only time they really strung together 2 good games in a row was against 2 bad teams in Philadelphia and Seattle. So like the whole team has to start stringing it together. And if they're a lot, like, I don't need those guys to drive the bus. I don't think they weren't brought in here to be 2 of your 3 or 4 best players. Like they're like Elias Lindholm is ideally maybe your 5th, 6th best player, and Zadorov's like your 8th or 9th best player. So if those guys can just be like part of the rising tide that lifts all boats, like that's all I'm expecting. I don't need them to be the one dragging everyone else along. And I don't expect them to do that in their first year here. Now, if the rest of the team starts picking it up and they're still struggling and they're like getting left behind, then that's when I would start to worry.
So we do have to get into the mailbag, but we got to button up this game real quick. So, no disrespect to Zacha and Coyle because it was a big development for them, and quietly, whether they've been scoring or not, I think both of their games have been very strong since that Philadelphia game as individuals. So it's good to see that, again, whether the points are there or not, their games are picking up. And, lo and behold, the points have followed. Zacha, more or less should have 2 goals in his last 3 games. We talked about that goal that was called back in Seattle. It was very, very barely offsides. Didn't affect the play. One of those types of plays. But in the essence of timing, we probably won't spend too much time on those. But that's them picking it up is obviously huge. It's been a big reason for their struggles is their struggles. But I do want to talk about the special teams because, again, the Bruins get the win. They go 0 for 2 on the power play, not a huge sample size, 1 for 3 on the penalty kill. So at least they stayed out of the box a hell of a lot more. But again, you give up the 1 goal from distance.
Yeah,
but
Marchand stupid penalty, and Zadorov takes another penalty. But those are the emotional penalties that he can't be taking, and he still seems to be taking.
And I was gonna say, just for the sake of clarification, Bruins penalty kill went 2 for 3, allowed Calgary's power play to go 1 for 3. Just so.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification.
1 power play goal.
1 power play goal against. But Bridget, to your point, that's what I was going to bring up. So we talk about the undisciplined nature of the Bruins game that's been killing them all season. I know he gets the game-winning goal in overtime. Love it. That's huge. But again, let's rewind the clocks back to the first minute of the third period. You're up 3-1, and you take a stupid penalty as the captain. And then lo and behold, the Flames score, and it's 3-2. It changes the tenor of the game. Marchand has to do a better job in the leadership department with the discipline, especially when it's something that's killing your team. Like, you cannot be the one as the captain to be, leading that parade to the box in that moment. You got to have the situational awareness. And I didn't like seeing that because, again, he gets the goal with 20 seconds left thanks to a big forecheck from Lindholm. But now, you let the team back in the game. They tie the game. Then it goes to overtime, which is anybody's game. And fortunately for the Bruins, they get the win. Marchand gets the game-winning goal. No harm, no foul. But it's not always the result is not always the point here. And he has to be better to lead his team in a discipline department.
Yeah, like at least he bounces back, right? Like, that's good, and that's what you need everyone to do. It's like, hey, if you have a bad play, if you make a mistake, you have to keep going and just be better the rest of the game. And to Marchand's credit, he was. But yeah, I hated that penalty. And like I tweeted, it was just a bad penalty to take at the time. And I got some responses of like, it wasn't even that rough. Like, he just face washed him. And it's like, yeah, but it was completely unnecessary. And like, the refs are probably going to call that. And Brad Marchand is not going to get the benefit of the doubt. Like, the play was over. The whistle had blown. Brazeau, comes in and like, there's a little bit of a scrum. That scrum is over. And then Marchand comes back in with the face wash. And it's like, you just can't do it. Like, you just can't jump back in there.
I think that like 9 times, maybe even 10 times out of 10, that's a penalty. Like, it was very I thought it looked like a punch. Like, it was just dumb. Obviously they showed on the NESN broadcast. There's some history there because it was Poitras kind of cheap shot on him at one point last year from behind, and there's definitely history between those two. So when Marchand saw a chance to get a punch in, he went for it. But you're going to get caught and you're going to end up in the box, and obviously it can change the momentum of the game, or it could even just change the outcome of the game. Luckily for him, he was able to kind of redeem himself with the overtime game winner, and I thought overall he had a good game. But it's still those things that you think back to, like, okay, well, that hurts your team, and that's an easy thing to just not do. So,
well, it's just selfish, and especially in 2024, these refs are looking for that stuff. It's not the same league that it once was when he entered, or certainly years before. Like, to the comments that Scott was receiving, it's like, yeah, we all see that it's a whole lot of nothing, a little bit of a face wash. But again, you have to remember, like, you cannot give refs in 2024 an opportunity to make a call because they're whistle happy. And Bridget, you mentioned it. Like, Marchand had a hair across his ass because what was his name? Pasta Vazul. He had an issue.
Pasta Vazul. That's
he got Marchand last year or something. So it's just time and a place. And again, Marchand should know much better than that. He's been around for far too long, been far too successful. Okay. there are other takeaways from the game, but we do have to move on. So
Yeah, we want to give people's mailbag.
Yeah.
We get a lot, especially we get a lot on via email. We obviously get some tweets and comments on YouTube as well, but a lot of the emails we get are really well thought out, and a lot of people this week with questions about Poitras. A lot of love for Poitras. I guess it's not really surprising because he's a likable player. And 5-on-5 he's been doing pretty well. So that could be an area that we start in, just because it seemed like maybe the highest interest that people had. Brian, do you want me to go through it, or are you going to go through it?
Yeah, I can go through it just to go off what you were just saying. For those who submitted multiple questions, we appreciate them. We'll probably more or less just pick one for those who sent multiple, just to keep the train rolling and make sure everybody gets in. But yeah, Bridget, to your point. So our first question comes from Kim. And this is actually not Poitras related, so I'm just gonna go back to the top just to not lose myself, Bridget. So Kim says, why didn't the Bruins sign Danton Heinen for $2 million instead of signing Tufte and Jones? You knew what you had in Heinen. He could play anywhere and was a favorite of Monty. Instead, you end up taking two guys who have not helped the team in any way and take stupid penalties. Thankfully, Tufte has been waived. Do you feel Jones is next now that Johnson has been signed? This question was before Max Jones was indeed waived. So that's the first part. And then with the signing of Tyler Johnson, does Sweeney now pursue a trade for Geeky? So Danton Heinen, pretty affordable contract in Vancouver. To Kim's point, like, we know what he can do in Boston during his 2 stints. Reliable player, does all the little things right. Fair to second guess?
I think he's a victim of the fact that contract with Swayman wasn't done yet, and that there was just the need to keep more flexibility. So he ended up, obviously he deserved a bigger contract than because of the hard work he put in last season, and they just didn't think they would have room for both him and Swayman, or the potential to have that extra cap space, I think, is really the true reason. Now, is he a better fit than both of those guys? Yeah, of course he was. He was a versatile player. And if you had the choice, if you're given the choice to have those two or him for the same amount of money, you're going to choose Heinen. He's the better player of the three, but it was just the timing issue with the Swayman contract not being done. He has to find a new home.
Yeah, it's not as simple as 1 + 1 = 2, because you're talking about like taking up roster spots and taking up cap space. So really, like, if you have Danton Heinen at $2.25 million, then that's gonna be, and say you don't sign Max Jones, like, fine, but that's $1.25 million more dollars devoted to a roster spot that then can't be used for Swayman or can't be used for an extra player. Like, you might only be able to afford a 21-man roster at that point, which would mean either no 13th forward or no 7th defenseman. Like, Jones is $1 million. Tufte is the league minimum, $775,000. Like, those are easy contracts to just move around and play with and send down to Providence. Whereas, like, if Heinen's here, like, obviously he's on the team, and that's just, again, like, $1.25 million doesn't sound like a lot, but especially, as Bridget mentioned, with the uncertainty around Swayman, like, the Bruins needed every free penny they could find until that deal got locked in.
So, and I think the natural follow-up is, okay, so is this where Bruins fans have a reason to have, some feelings about the way the Swayman stuff went down between the players' camp and the team, and the dramatics that ensued and the time that it took? Yeah, if you have the player locked up a little bit sooner in the summer, maybe you have your dollars and cents figured out more for free agency and other things. So I think that's a fair notion to maybe be a little bit annoyed about, but at the
Well-
same time, that's the business, and like you can't rush things, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the only way you get Swayman signed earlier is if you give him $9 million a year, and then I promise you, you're not re-signing Heinen, rather. So
Signing,
yeah,
Heinen.
Heinen.
Danton's signing in Vancouver. Scott is where he's signing.
Yeah.
But no,
and also like the other note here is like Tyler Johnson is the Heinen replacement. Like the same thing you did with Heinen last year, you did with Johnson this year. Like guy who didn't have maybe other opportunities that he was hoping for. You bring him in, you eventually give him a 1-year prove it deal. And, so let's monitor how that goes. Like if 2 months from now, Tyler Johnson is outproducing what Heinen's doing in Vancouver, no one's going to miss Danton Heinen.
And to that point, the second part of Kim's question, does the signing of Tyler Johnson, which has happened now, like, does that make a player like Morgan Geekie, who's the odd man out right now, expendable on a trade possibly? Or again, I'm kind of saying that I don't know what his no trade clause is, if there is one, but the second part of her question.
I think he has one.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's been scratched the last 2 games. He clearly is kind of the odd man out right now, and Tyler Johnson is playing on the first line as of last game against Calgary, and he is playing on the second power play unit, and his ceiling appears to be higher than Geekie. His floor, I think, also is higher than Geekie, if you guys would agree with that. I mean, maybe if age catches up to him, it's not, but as of right now, it kind of looks like that. He's been going to the net really hard. He's been finding himself in those areas of the ice. Eventually, good things are going to happen for him if he keeps doing that. So, but to the point about the trade, they're gonna obviously get rid of one of their, I'll say, bottom 6 players at some point. If we get to the trade deadline, they're either moving picks, which they don't have a lot of, or probably someone in that area where Geekie could be a target. But yeah, guys, what do you think? Is there room for both of them on this roster?
I mean, there is, like, they literally have room right now. I think if you're like, they don't have to trade Geekie. Like, if he has to sit and work to earn his way back into the lineup, then so be it. Someone has to be the 13th forward, and no one is ever happy when they're the 13th forward. Now, the reason to trade Geekie, if you could find a buyer at some point, is right now he's a $2 million 13th forward, and that could be an extra $1 million that you could use at the trade deadline on an upgrade in your top 6 if you were able to move him. I don't know who's taking him on for $2 million right now. Like, maybe there is a team out there that believes in him, that sees what he did last year and thinks, hey, we could bring him in for the rest of the season, see if he does that here, and then maybe we re-sign him. But like, obviously you would be selling low right now. Like, you're not getting anything in return for Geekie right now. So at this point, it would just be, to me, it would seem like just a salary dump. I don't know if you just wait, like, at this point, like, you might as well just wait, see if he gets back in and at some point and maybe builds a little bit of value for himself.
Yeah, I think the log jam that, when Bridget mentions is there room for all, I think maybe less to do with right now in the moment. I think maybe, but in time, Scott, you bring up the trade deadline. If you're trying to acquire more bodies for help later in the season, that might be where, okay, now you have too many bodies. Or, if somebody from Providence comes up and at some point and just sticks, which I'm not saying is likely, but if that were the case.
Also, I hate to bring up the I word, but you need a little bit of depth there if there's an injury.
Correct.
So yeah, it's important to keep someone like that.
I would just say, like, look, the Bruins mentioned earlier in the before the season, like they're trying to play fast. They're trying to play faster. Speed for mano a mano. Johnson plays way faster than Geekie does. So but we'll see how it plays out. We have a lot of questions to get to, but something to keep an eye on. So next question we have Sam. A couple questions here from her. So we'll start with the first one. I'm not convinced Monty survives the year as coach. What concerns me is that I hear everyone talking about how the Bees already have great replacements behind the bench ready to go when that happens. Chris Kelly, Jay Leach, Joe Sacco. Quite frankly, I'm not impressed by any of them and feel they are as much to blame as Monty regarding the mess the team is in right now. The power play hasn't improved. The defense is shaky. Have to believe they've had some input regarding the constant line changes. I don't think hiring any of the three would provide the big change that would be needed. Thoughts and any chance they go outside the organization, obviously, if Monty were fired. I guess to that last part, I just think from a convenience standpoint, like I think it would probably be an internal guy that you mentioned, Sam. As far as like, would they bring anything differently? I'll let my co-hosts go off on that because I know that they have thoughts.
Well, unless Sweeney has been, in the background of all of this, talking to other coaches and has a set plan that he sets up or a guy that he's targeting that's available right now, then it seems like, and this is what happens with most teams, it is an internal solution because you're in the middle of the season. And there's not always the perfect guy out there for you because a lot of guys have settled in their roles wherever they are. Not to say there's not good coaches you might be able to pull from somewhere else, but either way, it seems much more likely that you pull from within. I don't know if you agree, Scott, but it's hard. It's just a hard thing to coordinate at this time of year.
Yeah, generally when a coach gets fired mid-season, it's an internal hire or promotion. And that doesn't mean that they're named the full-time head coach. Like usually it's interim head coach until the end of the season. And maybe there are people out there saying like they're great options. I wouldn't say they're great options because I just don't know. Like Joe Sacco has not been an NHL head coach for over a decade. Jay Leach has never been an NHL head coach. Chris Kelly just started coaching a few years ago and obviously has not been a head coach. I would just say they are options. I don't know about great ones, but they're ones that the Bruins are familiar with because they also interviewed both Sacco and Leach for the head coaching job after they fired Bruce Cassidy. So like they've been down that road. They've obviously considered it before. And I would say like Leach is the one as far as like, will they do anything different or are they all just on the same page and all part of the problem? I mean, Leach is the one I would look at as someone who might have different ideas. Like he was out with another organization in Seattle, just came back. When he was here, he wasn't in Boston. He was Providence's head coach. Like he may very well have a different approach and some things that maybe he sees right now where, if it came to that, where he's like, yeah, I would do that differently if I were head coach. Joe Sacco has been here for a while. So like, that's fair to wonder like how much he would actually change. And I would also note on Leach, like his responsibility is the defense. And obviously they got off to a shaky start trying to, get guys incorporated, buy in, do something a little different than last year. They have started to clean up like their defensive structure, at least 5-on-5. Penalty kill, that is Joe Sacco's responsibility. But like 5-on-5, like they're now 7th in the NHL in high danger chances allowed. Like that's a good spot to be. They are not giving up a lot of really dangerous scoring chances. So is it perfect? Not at all. But like there is progress being made there, and Leach is the one leading that.
Yeah, and I mean, thinking about where some of these coaches come from normally, when you're trying to hire a new guy, a lot of times like you're looking at maybe some guys in college or guys that got let go because their team didn't make the playoffs, or like, and obviously, like just thinking of somebody like Jay Pandolfo, who has been part of the Bruins organization and he's coaching BU, like. You're not getting him right now if that's a guy that you like, because I mean he's in a contract with BU and he's in the middle of the season, and I also think he likes working there. So
yeah, and they're going to win the national championship. So
and I knew that was coming.
I will say, as far as Monty's hot seat, and it was, in my opinion, it was pretty hot prior to the Philadelphia game, and I think is still vulnerable, but I would say that his hot seat has been simmering. I mean, the Bruins are winners in 3 of their last 4 as we currently record. So it's,
if they had lost to Calgary, though, this conversation would have heated back up.
No pun intended. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Flames. But yeah,
Flames.
but the reality is it's tough to fire a coach when you've won 3 or 4. It's just optically, it's just, I mean, it can be done, but I just think it's his hot seat is cooling for the moment.
Yeah, what I think like the most popular outside name that people bring up is Joel Quenneville. And maybe I'm wrong, but like I just don't think the Bruins would go near that. Like obviously
No.
he was connected to the whole Blackhawks sexual assault scandal.
No.
And the Bruins just aren't in a position where they can like even afford to think they can take on that kind of potential PR hit. Like Mitchell Miller was 2 years ago. And last year, like I know last year wasn't, they couldn't have predicted it, but like you had Milan Lucic. So I don't think the Bruins would want to do that. One other name I would just be curious about. I wonder if like Neely and Sweeney would make a call. Would be Rick Bowness, who did a good job in Winnipeg, retired after last season, but way back in the 90s, he coached both Neely and Sweeney in Boston. I believe they both really like him. Like, I don't know. Would he come out of retirement for half a season or 3/4 of a season to try to help out his pals? Like, I have not heard anything on that, but I wonder.
Yeah, I just think that if the Bruins, because Scott, you mentioned that their 5-on-5 play is improving, and again, players are starting to that have been ice cold. They're starting to make themselves known a little bit. So let's give it a month here and see if a coaching change is even on the table at that point. But for right now, obviously it's been a Jekyll and Hyde start to the year, so it's understandable. Sam also, yeah, go ahead,
think
Bridget.
we should maybe skip ahead to CJ's question because just because we got like multiple questions from each people, we might just want to jump ahead because we don't have all that much time. I got to go to a wedding not that long from now. So
Bridget's getting married.
I'm getting married, guys. No, I'm not. But my cousin is, so heading out to Western Mass. But this one from CJ says Scott posted over the weekend that Poitras led the team on the ice in 5-on-5 in a bunch of different categories: shot attempts, expected goals, scoring chances, and high danger chances. Yet when Scott asked Monty about his play, he said that Poitras needed to earn his chances for minutes on the top lines and also on the power play. So he says, what else does this kid need to do right now? He's your best 5-on-5 player, yet Monty refuses to put him with talent that would utilize his playmaking ability more effectively.
Yeah, so I guess my response to this would be that the Bruins obviously expect to pick things up this season and be a playoff team. Matt Poitras is an important part of the team, and making sure he makes it to the end of the season into the playoffs is probably their number one goal as it relates to Matt Poitras right now. He did not survive the season last year. He took a lot of hits, suffered a shoulder injury, tried to play through it, made it worse, needed surgery. Like that happening again this year would be kind of a worst case scenario to have your first 2 seasons cut short by injury. Jim Montgomery, almost every time he's asked about Poitras, makes note of the fact that Poitras is still taking too many hard hits. And we all see that. Like part of it is he's getting targeted. Part of it is he puts himself in those positions. The one that he took a couple games ago where he got lit up behind the net and Frederick comes to his defense and it's, kind of a rallying moment for the team. I hate to like blame the guy getting hit, but like he should have seen it coming. Like he just didn't have his head up. He didn't look over his shoulder before he got to the puck. So if you move him up in the lineup, while yes, he might have some chemistry with Pastrnak, it also means he's playing more minutes and he's playing tougher matchups. And I think they worry about how long he would survive in that kind of role. So to me, that's yes, Poitras' numbers at 5-on-5 this year are very good, and that is encouraging. And he is, I don't want to say feasting because like his line actually isn't scoring a ton of goals yet, but they're controlling play when he's on the ice, but that's in a third line role. That doesn't mean that would translate to a first line role. Like right now, he's facing a lot of third and fourth lines, second and third defense pairings. The combination of tougher matchups and more minutes, a heavier workload, I think makes the Bruins hesitant to do that right now. And I think that's understandable. Like I am in no rush to turn Matt Poitras into an 18-minute a night player who's going against every opponent's best players.
But the power play should be an area where they can probably put him out there without trepidation of getting injured. I mean, if you put him on the first or second unit, let's call it the second, I think that's where people get frustrated because they see, a combination of players always being on the second unit. It's, he has at times, but I mean, if you're talking skill level, talent level, and the effectiveness that CJ's talking about and the scoring chances, shot attempts, all those things, I do think he should be one of those players where it's not automatic that he's on one of the two units. But I could be wrong. That's just my opinion. I think he
Also,
creates enough.
Yeah, I mean, I like the 1 or 2 shifts a night that we get to see him with Pastrnak because that the potential's there, and that is why we're getting a lot of questions about Poitras because you can see the flashes of it when they're together, of like making that connection and thinking at the same pace. And Poitras is able to find Pasta on the ice a lot of times. They did connect for a goal a few games back when they were out there for a 4-on-4. But these are situations that are either usually following a penalty kill where those guys have been on the bench for a while and they get a shift together to get them right back out there because they're fresh, or one of those 4-on-4 situations where it's not a normal 5-on-5. Like, they've not been paired together at any point during the season at just regular lines 5-on-5. And I can see the temptation for sure. I'd be tempted to do it just because Poitras thinks the game at the level of a top 6 player, but maybe still developing that physical part of his game and learning how to avoid hits in the NHL. He's still more of a middle 6, bottom 6 in that area, which makes him hard to move up. So I guess I agree with Scott, but I also agree with wanting to see him there because there's certainly potential, and maybe someday that does become something that they try when they feel that he's ready. And either way, like maybe get them some time together, not necessarily the whole game, but you know how much Monty likes to change lines up. So if you're going through a game and you just, hey, why don't we try this for a period? That also could give people a little taste of what they want. Oh, but before we get to our next question, guys, this popped back into my head. And
I also had a quick follow-up right after.
Okay, sorry. This is not related. So if you want to do that.
So on the power play, listen, I would put him on the second unit too. Like I'm on board. Just to quickly play devil's advocate, I think we all agree maybe the power play's biggest issue is the puck not moving quickly enough. We have seen Poitras when he's gotten power play time. At times he hangs onto the puck too long and seems to like run out of options. But you got to put him out there to improve that. Like he's got to go through it. So I would still put him out there, but I think that's probably the reason he's not.
So what popped into my head, guys, is something that happened last night that it only popped into my head because this is another guy that started his career last year as well. And Johnny Beecher, he didn't play much last night. He only took 1 shift early in the third period, but looking back on it, it was only in the first minute, and he kind of came up limp a little bit. I don't think he got benched. I think he might be suffering from a little bit of a lower body injury. So I just wanted to bring that up because I know we also have some big fans of Johnny Beecher as well that probably want to know what happened to him and why he had only about 6 minutes of ice time last night and why they didn't see him in the third period. I don't think it was a benching situation. I think maybe he was dealing with something, but Montgomery would not answer the question after the game. He just said, I thought he played well in the 6 minutes that he played. Very vague.
Yeah, I was gonna say that that's what catches my ear is it would have been very easy if it was just he's banged up. It's very easy for Montgomery to say, yeah, he was dealing with a little something and we weren't gonna risk it. But that answer was weird.
It was, and it was a little bit standoffish. I think he maybe just didn't like the reporter that asked it, and I'm not gonna name names, but
yeah, I don't
it
know,
could be
but
something to that.
you're not your responses in a press conference aren't just going to one reporter. So everyone hears that answer, and it was a weird one.
Yeah, but it also made me think if he played well in the 6 minutes, then isn't he then he wasn't getting benched for any reason that he was involved in. You know what I mean? So it has to either be.
Then why didn't he play?
Yeah, I mean, but watch the first minute back. He comes up looking a little bit hurt.
I know. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just don't know why he wouldn't say he was a little banged up and we weren't.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why it came back to me, because it was just an odd, just an odd thing after the game that we heard.
So let's try to rattle through some of these because everybody took their time to submit these. So Mark K asked a question about putting Poitras on the power play and how it's taking away from his ice time, not being out there. We kind of touched on that already. The first part of his question is clearly the power play is a disaster, has been for a while. If they aren't going to fire Montgomery, do you think it's time to at least fire Chris Kelly and get someone new in to run the power play? Quickly, I'll just say, I've said it all along. I'll say it again. Their zone entries, you can see that they're trying to make some adjustments on the fly. They have to find a way to come up the ice together with more speed and passing options and just be more straight line. If you want to add some layers in, sure, but they have to find a way to come up the ice with more speed and be more unison. And then in the offensive zone, we can talk about different player personnel for each unit, but we don't have time for that at this moment. But I will say, I mentioned it last night on Twitter to one of Scott's things, but and I say it on the podcast, but Marchand and Pastrnak, they have to rotate half wall positions more over the course of a 2-minute power play. Get both guys on their strong side. It gets them skating downhill. They see the ice more. They're an equal shooting and passing threat in that moment. When you're on your offside, your hips are open. You're not very mobile, and it's too predictable. You're going to try to do one-timers, and of those two players, one is far better at a one-timer than the other. I'm not going to name names. Pasternak's much better than Marchand. So there are things to adjust systematically, but as far as the firing Chris Kelly and get somebody in there to run the power play, besides him, Bridge and Scott, do you have any strong feelings on that?
Well, it's really a tag team running the power play because Montgomery is a big part of it as well. So it's Montgomery and Kelly together. And yeah, at some point, the power play fell apart the second half of last year. Now it's off to a bad start this year. At some point you have to look at the coaches and be like, do we need to make changes there?
Also, plenty of times assistant coaches get fired before the head coach. So that's the first example. And then do you need a bigger example? We're going to go head coach.
And it would be tough for Chris Kelly because I think he does a lot of other things well. I think he's good with players. And, he wasn't a power play guy in his career. He was a penalty killer. So he has that perspective of knowing what kind of power play gives a penalty kill trouble. And Jim Montgomery has been praised for his power plays elsewhere. When he was in St. Louis, Craig Berube gave him 100% credit for turning around their power play. And players, Torrey Krug said it was great working with him. So he's done it, but for whatever reason, it's not happening here right now. And I still think a lot of blame has to go to the players for not, picking up the pace. Again, the skill level is there, but yeah, at some point though, it's absolutely fair to question the coaching and whether or not they're the right ones to to be able to fix this.
I want to read Gary and Ian's question now because we got a question from the UK, which it was interesting to read this whole email. I'm I'm gonna go through a little bit of it because obviously a lot of our questions come from the US and Canada. We've met some fans in Montreal, which was cool, but we didn't know we had people listening to the podcast from the UK. And so Gary and Ian say, we're from the UK and we're new Bruins fans. Hockey has a very low profile in the UK. However, they decided to jump on board because they're big sports fans. But I think it's funny because I feel like the reasons that they chose the Bruins were a little funny. He said we wouldn't support any team that wears red because of the football team that they support. Sorry guys, we don't really know too. Actually, Scott does. Who are they referencing? Okay, who are they referencing that they don't like?
They're Sheffield Wednesday fans, and their biggest rival is Sheffield United, who wears red.
Okay, well, there we go. Scott solved this. And won't root for a team in a warm climate. So then they decided on the Bruins, and they went all in, got the merch, got some jerseys. So they're here and they're fully supporting the Bruins now. And I think Patrice Bergeron is a guy that they also like. So
no, they said they never got to watch Bergeron. Like they're such new fans that that they're like, we're probably one of the only Bruins fans who never even really watched Bergeron.
Well, you still could like him. He's a good dude. So here is the question from Gary and Ian. We've never been particularly impressed with Pavel Zacha. He seems to stay busy, but lacks a quality effort in front of the net, being in a good position, but stuttering at the final hurdle often. Are we missing something? How does he consistently stay in the top lines and get priority over other players? To our untrained eyes, is he rated by the fan base? How is he rated by the fan base as a whole? And if so,
they say, yeah, that they write, is he rated by the fan base as a whole, which is like one of my favorite British things where in America, you always have to like assign a value to rated, like either rated highly or lowly. And like in like England and like in soccer, it's like rated just means like, do you like him? Like, do you think he's good?
Okay. So guys, is he rated?
I think so.
I think there's some fair points there about how like Zacha can tend to look like a quiet player who's and he does definitely lack some finishing touch at times, which we've seen throughout this quiet stretch recently. I think things he does well and that keeps him high in the lineup is he's a good support player. He's almost always like in the right spot. He's a good passer. Like he plays off other good players well. Look, he's never going to be one of your on a really good team. He's not going to be one of your 2 or 3 best forwards. But if he's your 5th or 6th best, then I think you're in pretty good shape. Like this is a guy we've seen top 50 points each of the last 2 years. So when he's with good players, like he is able to produce at a pretty decent level, despite the slow start this year.
And I think that maybe if they're jumping in as fans, they might not know this part of his background, but he was once the 6th overall pick. And the Bruins got him in a pretty fair trade for Erik Haula from New Jersey. So basically, it felt like he was a better fit here. Erik Haula was a better fit there. And he's obviously liked by teammates, and he's had chemistry with Pastrnak in the past. If you never saw Bergeron play, then you probably never saw Krejci play. But that was the best line he was part of was when he was playing with Krejci, who was centering that line, and Pastrnak on the right side. So there's the potential is there. He was, like I said, drafted really highly. A lot of people think highly of his offensive skill set, including his shot. Like if you watch his shot from distance, kind of like top of the circle, he's got a really, really quick, usually effective shot when he's playing at his best. And I think just the deal that they got him on has good value. And so he finds himself playing with a guy like David Pastrnak because they know each other's game. They have each other figured out, and a lot of times when Pasternak's clicking, Zacha has something to do with it. So
yeah, I think the best way to describe it is for all sports fans that can understand this is from a pure talent standpoint, his skill set is one of the best on the team. So whether or not that's converting into point production, you know, you don't want to slide him down in the lineup too far because he has that key word, which is potential to be. He has a higher ceiling than other players' ceilings if he is to reach it. And so the Bruins try to find ways to get him in that position. And I think that's the best way to describe him. So we appreciate the new fandom. Hockey is a wonderful sport to follow, and probably a little bit more physical than watching football back over in Europe. But Boston and Boston sports fans, Bruins fans are extremely passionate, and that is something that European soccer fans can relate to.
yeah, come over to Boston, watch a game. We'll go get a beer. Scott and I, we have a few breweries we like to hit up there. So,
Bridget and Scott, I we do have at least a couple more. I know, Bridget, you don't have a ton of time, so maybe if you can spare 10 or
10 minutes, I can take 10
let's
more minutes.
let's take 10 minutes and just try to rattle off a few of these because yeah, just out of respect for everybody who participated. So I guess let's go down to YouTube just because I kind of lost my place. So we have Bruins 77_7. Okay. I'm reading this for the first time. So this is interesting. But okay. So he says, is it time to start thinking about trading McAvoy and Pastrnak? Probably hard with no trade, no movement clauses. And he goes on to talk about their play this year. So look, I mean, I'll let you guys go off on this quickly. To trade both of them is, obviously that's the answer. My answer in short is no. I'm not really laughing at the question per se because you see a lot of fans, that say McAvoy might be overrated or Pastrnak. All he can do is score and look, like people have a right to their opinion and always fair game to ask a question. I think to trade, does this question say trade and McAvoy and Pastrnak? Yeah,
I'm guessing it means, but I'm guessing it probably more of an or because
it's just not.
I don't know. I think this person seems pretty pissed at both of them.
It's just not. It's the answer. It's just not a realistic situation for a lot of reasons.
And who they would rather have is Matt Tkachuk. Great player.
I assume. Yeah, I mean, obviously the other one. Yeah, people throw out Brady Tkachuk a lot, so people think he's going to want. People think he's going to want out of Ottawa.
Yeah.
Which he might. Like, I don't know how long you can really deal with that team, that situation. By the way, they're coming into Boston on Saturday. They've been struggling recently, and Linus Ullmark has been struggling. We're going to get the Ullmark-Swayman matchup. Both goalies trying to find their form from past couple years.
I'm going to plug myself again here. 1:30. If you want to watch the game before that, I'll be broadcasting a game on SN at 1:30, and then you can just watch hockey all day.
Which game is that?
It is Northeastern Yukon, so it's a rematch of the Women's Hockey East Championship game from last year.
All right.
It's like I'm not watching.
No, I'll watch. No, so I was just going to get back to the question quick. No, realistically, no, you can't trade McAvoy and Pastrnak because they are your building blocks. Like, they're your future. I think people think like because the Jonathan Huberdeau from Matthew Tkachuk trade happened once that like now any team can just do that if they're not 100% satisfied with their core players. And that is the exception to the rule. Like, that kind of trade happens once every 15 years. It's certainly not going to happen twice with the same team. So if you wanted to, like, could you trade one of them at some point? You could try. I think it's extremely difficult. And to me, like, your path back to a cup is those two guys just playing the way that they're capable of playing and upping their level of play from what they've shown so far this season. I mean, David Pastrnak is coming off back-to-back 110-point plus seasons. There are like 5 guys in the world who can do that. So I don't know like what trade you're even making where you're getting anything that resembles fair value. And if you're not getting fair value, like then you're really just rebuilding. Like then you're really just talking about a teardown where you're trying to get high draft picks or a bunch of draft picks or whatever. And I don't think ownership has any appetite for that.
Tying in Mark G's question, he says Pastrnak seems disengaged so far this year. He asks if he might be unhappy with something. Have you guys seen anything in his body language or play or demeanor where he seems upset about something or disengaged?
I think he's frustrated. I think he's frustrated that the season hasn't started the way he wants individually or the way that he wants it to go for the team. I don't think he's unhappy or disengaged. I think he's frustrated, and I think that's shown in some of the penalties he's taken. Like, very uncharacteristic for David Pastrnak to take as many penalties as he has. Some of them have probably been lazy. I think more of them have been frustration where he's like trying to overdo things, trying to force something, and is making mistakes because of it. It's the same. I think some of the same things that feed into his turnovers. Like, yeah, some of it's reckless. Some of it is trying to do too much. And, so I think he's pressing, and I think he's a frustrated player. And if he has a hat trick the next game or goes on a 5-game goal scoring streak, I think you're going to see a much happier David Pastrnak, like the one we're used to seeing.
Bridget and Scott, 2 very quick more questions. The first one from Don Sweeney. If you could, very, very loyal listener.
I laugh every time.
If we could see into the future and know that the Bruins with this core, don't win a Stanley Cup, would you still, would you rather just have them, in hindsight, have them start rebuilding now, or would you still want to see a good product, playoff hockey, even if you knew it wouldn't amount to a Stanley Cup? It's an interesting question. It makes you feel like it's a waste of time to say one of the answers. They both kind of seem like waste of times because rebuilding is not a fun process either. But what do you? I mean, in reality, would you rather or enjoy watching a generally competitive team and stay loyal to this core? I mean, that just describes the Boston Bruins for the last 50 years.
I was just gonna say it's like that's essentially what's been going on since 2011. And I think
longer than that. That's the entire Jacobs ownership, to Brian's point.
But they did win in 2011, and they've been to a few cup finals and lost. I mean, obviously, there's no real good answer to this, but I think Bruins fans have enjoyed the players that Boston has, and how many people have been having fun over that span of time watching this team? Like, if the question is about what,
I totally disagree.
I just said I'm not answering either way.
The only goal is to win a Stanley Cup. If you're telling me this core is never going to win a cup with 100% certainty, then you're tearing it down and you're rebuilding and you're trying something else.
Yeah, well, what if David Pastrnak's your favorite player?
If he's not winning me a cup, what's the point? Like,
wow, I didn't expect Don to get you guys this fired up with this question. We should have started off with this one.
I mean, listen, I think the Jacobs family might be more in your camp of like, let's just put out a competitive team if the Jacobs knew this, but no one else did, like that's what they might choose. But I'm not part of the Jacobs family. I'm telling you what I feel is the only goal, the only thing you build towards is winning a Stanley Cup.
I feel like this is like a bargument, as Fitzy would say.
Yeah.
This is like what you bring up when you're like, you've had like 3 beers and you're sitting at a bar, like a Boston bar, and you're like,
I have had 3 beers, mind you.
oh wow, it's only 10:30. Okay, I haven't even gone to the wedding yet, and Scott's already ahead of me. But no, this is like the arguments you get in with your friends that are just hypothetical, and you just end up getting angry at each other for no reason. It's like really passionate about this at this point, but yeah. All right,
let's hit this last one, guys. And then we'll get out of here. And thank you everybody for submitting questions. We really do appreciate it, and that's why we want to reward you for reading them. So we're gonna go to Liz for last here, and so basically, guys, she asked if one of the reasons the Bruins are off to a tough start this year has to do with the way their training camp was ran, and it seems that there may have been more focus on up and coming players from Providence who could potentially crack the lineup in that competition rather than the core players, and focusing on power play and special teams in general, 5-on-5 play, all these things. How do you guys feel about that? Because I voiced my opinion. I, for one reason or the other, didn't love their training camp. She mentions that, and I do think it had something to do with their slow start. I think one leads into the other. They had a slow training camp. Their preseason games were uninspired, and they started the season uninspired. It's tough to not draw a correlation to that. So I think this question is totally fair.
Yeah, and I think people maybe in training camp got let off the hook as being rusty because it's just early on in the summer and maybe not necessarily pushed as hard. There's a good reason why a lot of the times the younger guys get those looks, especially if there's guys that are right on the cusp of making the team. And injury is a big reason why some of the veterans stay out. You don't want to get them injured in preseason. And also some of the guys were injured already. Elias Lindholm was injured. And then obviously Jeremy Swayman just wasn't available because of the contract. So
Brad Marchand missed the first half recovering from surgeries.
Yeah. So there was injury reasons why some guys got held out. And also like Charlie Coyle barely played, but
Matt Poitras missed like the last week with an injury.
Yep. So, but the point is fair. Like if you're trying to get guys who haven't played together before to work together, and or just try to get them up to speed together at the same time, there certainly could have been a different philosophy during training camp to get the intensity up, because the intensity certainly was not there to start the season. So maybe it should have started before the season even got there, to just prepare people for actual games.
Yeah, it's clear like they didn't have a great training camp, and Jim Montgomery kind of admitted as much at one point where he said it was kind of disjointed. And part of that is the injuries. Like you can't avoid that was a factor. Those are key players, 3 of your top 9 forwards who all missed significant time. That affects chemistry. But and like that can also contribute to maybe a mindset sets in where it's like, hey, we already have a couple guys out. Like, let's just make sure we stay healthy and get to opening night. And like that doesn't get you ready for the season. Like if you're just playing it safe, then you're not preparing for NHL regular season hockey. So I think like it's easy to see why it kind of happened, but I'm sure obviously if they could go back, they would have a more intense training camp and try to make sure that they were ready to hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's a coaching thing.
Guys, why don't they, and forgive me if I'm mistaken, why don't they, and if they don't, when do they stop doing those team building exercises, going up to Vermont or this or that before there's like, didn't they used to do that? And I think, the 2011 season, but when they won the cup, it's a big story how they obviously started the season off in Europe, and that was a team bonding experience. Do the Bruins have any more of those? Like, obviously not Prague every year, but like do they not do that anymore? And if they don't, for how long?
They have like when the schedule has allowed for it. That I think that's another issue. Is like their preseason schedule this year was packed. It was every other night. They had 7 games. I think they were one of only 2 teams that had 7 preseason games. And their last preseason game was on the road 2 days before opening or 3 days before opening night. So like there wasn't even a gap in between where it's like they could have gotten away for something. So I think they do look for opportunities for that, but they're really just from a schedule perspective, there really wasn't one this year.
Yeah, maybe send them to England for a preseason game for Gary and Ian. So
There you go, Bridget. There you go.
That's what we'll put in a good word for you guys.
So I appreciate everybody sending in questions. Bridget, Scott, appreciate your time. We know that Bridget has a tight schedule today. So
yeah, and we interrupted Scott's morning beers apparently. So we can get back to that now.
And he's at the office, by the way, because I can see his background.
I was gonna say, well, you don't know what's in my coffee.
Well, anyway, thank you all again for submitting questions. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy Bruins Senators on Saturday, and we will talk to you on Monday. Thank you very much. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.